In early April, the world's largest and luxury passenger ship, deemed to be unsinkable, set off across the Atlantic. It hit an iceberg and sank into the icy waters of North Atlantic, 400 miles away from Newfoundland around midnight, killing more than 2,000 passengers and crew members aboard. What worsened the death toll was a shortage of lifeboats, causing the unsinkable liner to sink and most of its passengers to drown. Do you think I am narrating the Titanic story? No, this wasn't the sinking of the Titanic. It's the plot of the novella Futility. You can say that the Titanic disaster has inspired countless stories. This might be one of them. But the shocking surprise is Novella Futility was published in 1898, 14 years before the Titanic sank. Yes, a small town writer, retired merchant US Navy officer Morgan Robertson predicted the fateful maiden voyage of the Titanic. Robertson's imagined ship Titan is nearly a mirror image of the Titanic. The tale could almost be the exact retelling of the Titanic tragedy if it were released after the incident. How did this novel predict the Titanic disaster 14 years before it happened? This novel that seemed to anticipate the Titanic's fate perfectly. At the time of its publication, Futility was not a popular book. After the Titanic disaster, a publisher reissued Futility, which was given the better name Wreck of the Titan. After the real unsinkable ship went down in 1912, readers started noticing some striking similarities between Robertson's fiction and the tragedy of Titanic is even more eerie. The name of the ship in the novel is Titan, and just like the Titanic, is the world's largest ship then. The Titan was described as one of the man's greatest works. The Titanic was deemed unsinkable and a wonder of its era. The Titan was described as unsinkable, and that's precisely how many felt about the Titanic too. The Titanic and the Titan were both triple-screwed British passenger liners. The Titan was 800 feet long and the Titanic was 882 feet. The Titan was traveling at 25 knots at the time of its collision. When the Titanic struck an iceberg, its speed was 22.5 knots. The Titan held 2,500 passengers. The Titanic held 2,200, though both had a capacity of 3,000. Both ships were hit on the starboard bow around midnight. Both sank in North Atlantic exactly 400 miles away from Newfoundland on a cold April night. Both had a severe lack of lifeboats. The Titan held 24 lifeboats, the Titanic just carrying 20. The Titan sinking resulted in the deaths of all 2,500 people on board. Only 13 survivors made it out. Over 1,500 people died on the Atlantic, while 706 survivors made it out. The long list of chillingly accurate resemblance between the novel and the Titanic make us to sit and notice the author's imagination. Some believe that Robertson has the ability to predict the future, but he denied this. He said that he was simply knowledgeable about maritime operations, saying, "I know what I'm writing about, that's all." Of course, it's important to note that the ocean liners were a major mode of travel in the late 19th and early 20th century. Robertson was the son of a ship captain and grew up as a cabin boy before becoming a first mate on a merchant ship. It's no wonder that he drew inspiration from his experiences and knowledge of the sea. He says it was a work of pure fiction. And the most eerie part is Robertson's Futility is not the only story that has strange commonalities of Titanic incident. One more fictional story written in 1886 that foretold the sinking of Titanic. On 22nd March 1886, W.T. Stead, British investigate journalist and prominent spiritualist, had published an article entitled "How the Mail Steamer Went Down in Mid-Atlantic by a Survivor." In the story, an unnamed ocean liner collides with another ship in a fog, then sinks in the Atlantic. And due to a shortage of lifeboats, there is a large loss of life. Stead wrote, "This is exactly what might take place and will take place if liners are sent to sea short of boats." In a horrible twist of fate, Stead was one of the passengers of Titanic and lost his life in the disaster. And in another strange twist, he reportedly convinced him to die either lynching or drowning. That's creepy. When the Titanic began to sink, W.T. Stead, rather than trying to save himself, he instead spent his last 2 hours on quietly reading a book in the first-class smoking room. The question is, did Robertson and W.T. Stead have subconscious precognition, knowledge of the future, or supernatural powers when they penned the story? It is the million-dollar question. What do you guys think? Did two fictional stories predict the tragedy, or was it a coincidence? Leave your comments. Okay friends, hope you learned something new today. Don't forget to subscribe and press the bell icon. Thanks for watching. Meet you with the new content in my next video. And this is your Atif Khan signing off.